This is the Hermetic Hour. I'm your host, Poke Runyon. And tonight, we present a discussion by our guest speaker, very honored Frater SithMeth, on the Arbatel of Magic, published in 1575. A grimoire calling up a hierarchy of Olympic spirits, which is featured in the fourth book of Occult philosophy attributed to Henry Cornelius Agrippa, and that was published in 1655. And this is a very mysterious manuscript which was outlined and summarized in the first installment, but never finished. However, there seems to be enough information, sigils, and instructions in what was published for some practical application. Frater SithMeth will read his article on the Arbatel, and we will explore the possible use in relation to planetary magic. So, if quaint and forgotten books of lore fascinate you, join with us, and we'll have a look at one of the most mysterious. And let me introduce Frater SithMeth, who is, I said very honored Frater SithMeth because he is sixth degree in the Crater system, and that is the one of the higher Rosicrucian degrees. So, Frater SithMeth, are you there and with us?
Believe I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. So go ahead and proceed with your article on the Arbatel of Magic.
I'd be happy to. I just want to check the sound levels. Last time I called in to discuss Pepe the Frog, I was apparently very quiet. Am I coming through very much loud and clear?
You're coming through loud and clear, and so keep it up at that level, and it'll be fine. Go ahead.
All right. In all things, call upon the name of the Lord, and without prayer unto God through his only begotten Son, do not thou undertake to do or think anything. Aphorism 2, the Arbatel of Magic. Mysterious tomes of ancient and half-forgotten lore, forged in secret by unknown hands, revealing to those souls brave enough to read them the great and terrible truths of the darkest magic. Such concepts are surely the stuff of mere fantasy and occult fiction. Yet in 1575, at a Swiss publishing house, a short yet powerful book came into public existence. Titled Arbatel de Magia Veterum, or Arbatel of the Magic of the Ancients, it is more commonly known by the simpler yet enigmatic title, the Arbatel of Magic. Little is known about the creation of this work, and less still about the mysterious author, or even precisely when it was written, although it is unlikely to have been written earlier than the mid-16th century, due to the nature of its contents and some internal references to the works of Paracelsus. Unknown, too, is the precise meaning of the word Arbatel. Arthur Edward Waite, in his book of ceremonial magic, assumes that the title is derived from the Hebrew name of an angel, which he surmises must have revealed the book's magical knowledge to its author. Others have suggested that it is a form representing the tetragrammaton, due to its similarity to the Hebrew word arbothim, meaning fourfold, and al, or God. Another idea is that it is the author's pseudonym, or perhaps even the Arabian word for divine chariot, Arbatel. But whether any of these are even close to correct may never be known. Published and republished over the many centuries since it first came into being, the Arbatel has been scrutinized and studied continuously in the occult community. Featuring prominently in the fourth book of occult philosophy ascribed to Henry Cornelius Agrippa, it was more recently and comprehensively dissected by the renowned occult scholar Donald Tyson in his publication of Agrippa's work. The book itself is divided into a series of 49 aphorisms, or statements of principle, these being gathered into 7 groups of 7 septenaries, outline a course of magical study neatly categorized into 9 distinct tomes, none of which actually exist. So the greatest mystery regarding this work is the fact that it seems little more than the first book in a series of books which were never published. As Donald Tyson writes in his analysis of the work, the Arbatel was conceived by its anonymous author as a substantial work of 9 books. Of these, only the first book was completed, but it is prefaced by an outline for the entire work. There is no evidence that any but the first book was ever written. It is more probable that the author intended the outline to serve as the template for his ambitious opus, and that after composing the first book, he lost interest or was otherwise prevented from finishing the plan. The general contents of each of these 9 books is broadly outlined, and the specific subject matter to be contained therein described. The first of these books is entitled Isagoge, a Greek word meaning introduction, and presents the general principles of magic according to the author. Potently Christian in tenor, as many traditional grimoires are, the author wishes there be no doubt that his magic is sacred, done openly in the sight of God and the angels, with their approbation and aid. A noteworthy difference, however, to other works of magic is the emphasis that the practicing magician not separate himself from social interaction, but rather involve himself actively within the community, favoring kindness, charity, and honesty over remote and obscure rituals. The second book, as intended by the author, entreats the aspiring magician to fervently pray and seek the counsel of God and his angels. A specific prayer is given, and Tyson suggests that this particular chapter of work is dedicated to the invocation of one's own personal genius, otherwise known as the holy guardian angel. O Lord of heaven and earth, creator and maker of all things visible and invisible, I, though unworthy, by thy assistance call upon thee through thy only begotten Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, that thou wilt give unto me thy Holy Spirit to direct me in thy truth unto all good. Amen. Because I earnestly desire perfectly to know the arts of this life, and such things as are necessary for us, which are so overwhelmed in darkness and polluted with infinite human opinions, that I of my own power can attain to no knowledge in them, unless thou teach it me. Grant me therefore one of thy spirits, who may teach me those things which thou wouldst have me know and learn, to thy praise and glory and the profit of our neighbor. Give me also an apt and teachable heart, that I may easily understand those things which thou teach me, and may hide them in my understanding, that I may bring them forth as out of thy inexhaustible treasures to all necessary uses, and give me grace, that I may use such gifts humbly, with fear and trembling, through our Lord Jesus Christ, with thy Holy Spirit. Amen. Of the sacred magic of Abramelin the mage, which famously details the means of contacting one's holy guardian angel, was published in 1608, 33 years after the Arbatel. The third book is dedicated to the invocation of the Olympic spirits, or governors of the 7 planets. A great deal more detail is presented within the span of these 7 apparitions, detail which practicing magicians will be all too familiar with. The practical method for making use of the 7 governors is given concisely. Each is called in his own hour by the proper name and office, and by the displaying of his particular sigil or character, which has been tested by the magician and confirmed by the governor himself to be valid. Certain powers and abilities may be drawn from communion with these spirits, according to the Arbatel. Powers such as the ability to turn anything into stone, invisibility, teleportation across vast distances, greatly extending one's own life, or even magically creating the philosopher's stone. And although the distinct names and sigils of 7 planetary spirits are given in this 3rd septenary, A very important point is made that the names of the Olympic spirits are not fixed, but vary from one magician to another as they are delivered by the spirit referred to as the spirit the revealer. This is probably the tutelary genius or holy guardian angel of the magician, which acts as an agent or intermediary in communication with the spirits. The author states that the names of the Olympic spirits seldom have any efficacy above 40 years. They are delivered to the magician for his personal use and cannot be used by other or later generations with any expectation of success. The implication is that each person must seek his own names of the Olympic spirits and his own set of characters or sigils. Therefore, the names given in the Isagoge are frustratingly only examples. The author gave the advice that young practitioners should work by the offices of the spirits alone, without their names, and if they are preordained to the practice of magic, those names will be given in due course. The 7 names that are given do appear in other grimoires: Aratron for Saturn, Bethor for Jupiter, Phaleg, Mars, Ok, the Sun, Hagith, Venus, Ophiel, Mercury, and Phal, the Moon, appear prominently in the veritable Key of Solomon by Stephen Skinner and David Rankin. This particular version of the ever-infamous Key of Solomon was taken from a 1796 French manuscript and presents a comprehensive system of occult operations dealing with the specific Olympic spirits found within the pages of the Arbatel, and although published over 200 years later, offers the practicing magician a viable and extant alternative to the Arbatel's missing 3rd book. Enigmatically, the 7 spirits, despite their transience of their names, are said to rule over curiously large and specific passages of time. According to the author, each governor rules over eras of 490 years. The parade of these eras, beginning in 60 BC, for unknown reasons, places us neatly in the era of Ophiel, of the planet Mercury, which apparently began in the year 1900. What precisely will occur when this cycle ends in the year 2879 can only be guessed at. One final curiosity within this section is the foreboding caution. A man that is a true magician is brought forth a magician from his mother's womb. Others who do give themselves to this office are unhappy. Precisely what this means is unclear. It might indicate the need to be a natural psychic or scryer. It may simply refer to that strange and ineffable pull towards the mystical that all true practitioners feel. But taken at face value, it would seem to suggest that one must be born a natural magician in order to work with these spirits. The 4th book is titled Hesiodiacal and Homeric Magic, the magic dealing with the Greek mythological lore described in the poetry of Hesiod and Homer, and the manner of controlling the spiritual creatures of the pagans, here called cacodemons, evil spirits, in such a way that those spirits may be induced to help in an act in a helpful manner. Among these spirits are the satyrs, dryads, sylphs, nymphs, and similar earthbound spirits of springs, trees, hills, stones, meadows, pools, and rivers. They are in contrast to the celestial spirits of the planets and their legions of serving spirits. Due to the undeniably passionate Christianity of the author, it is difficult to know whether the pagan earth spirits that would be treated in this book are actually evil or merely maligned, transformed by the Catholic Church, as the goddess Astarte was, into terrible demons. Such spirits bear curious resemblance to the Seti, or She of the fairies of Celtic legend, and it is interesting to note that the Book of Oberon, a grimoire dedicated to the Fey folk, was completed in 1577, only 2 years after the Arbatel. The fifth book to Roman or Sibylline magic, similar to the imperial ambitions of the English magician and scholar Dr. John Dee. This work is intended to call spirits that are placed over different geographical regions of the world. It should be noted that the publication of the Arbatel was contemporary to the life and work of Dr. John Dee, but predates his first meeting with his infamous scryer Edward Kelly by 7 years. It is quite possible that the Arbatel's mysterious seal of secrets, an elaborate wheel of spirit names described in Aphorisms 27, belongs to this particular branch of Arcana. The wheel is not dissimilar to other spirit wheels, such as the Master Mandala of our order. The Arbatel is noteworthy for what it omits as for what it includes. The way of drawing the seal of secrets is described, but the names and placements of the spirits that should occupy it are not given. The 7 seals of the Olympic spirits of the planets are depicted, yet the manner of using those seals is never explained. Also to be covered was the doctrine of the Druids, but the author gives no hint to the nature of this subject. Tyson suggests that perhaps augury, the magic of omens and signs, was intended, since this is associated both with the Sibylline books and with the Druids, who were famed for their powers of divination. The 6th book was to detail Pythagorical magic. Named for the Greek philosopher Pythagoras of the 5th century before Christ, this chapter of the Arbatel would undoubtedly have borne close resemblance to the numerology of Agrippa's 2nd book of occult philosophy, and may have included predictive astrological magic. Book 7 is dedicated to the magic of Apollonius. Apollonius of Tyana, whose life was described biographer Philostratus, was a 1st century mystic and possible contemporary of Jesus Christ. He was most renowned for his ability to cast out evil spirits, and his fame is perhaps second only to that of Jesus in this regard. This auspicious chapter likely dealt with exorcism, and perhaps even a form of goetic evocationary magic. Book 8, entitled Hermetical or Egyptian magic, was likely set aside for a very specific form of ancient arcana. As Tyson puts it, the Egyptians were concerned with a process of theurgy, known as god-making, whereby they induced spirits to descend and indwell in statues or other images, imbuing them with animation. In this way, the spirits indwelling in physical vessels could be more easily contacted and utilized by the magician. It is likely this chapter would have dealt with such magic. As Hermes Trismegistus said, they invented the art of making gods out of some material substance suited for this purpose, and to this invention they added a supernatural force, whereby the images might have power to work good or hurt, and combined it with the material substance. That is to say, being unable to make souls, they invoked the souls of daemons and implanted them in the statues by means of certain holy and sacred rites. Hermes called this the telestic art. Tyson believes that Book 9, or prophetical magic, in contrast to the druidic divination of Book 5, would have been intended for the interpretation and manipulation of biblical passages for the purpose of prophecy. It is strange that the Arbatel, essentially being an incomplete and limited work, would be chosen to feature so prominently in the 4th book of occult philosophy, alongside more eminently practical works on geomancy and ritual. Placement has the odd feel of a modern extract, as if it was included out of expectation or the desire to be obsessively completist. Donald Tyson, in a moment of academic whimsy, muses that it would be a fascinating project for a writer having some depth of knowledge and ability in practical magic to recreate the Arbatel in its entirety. And most tantalizingly, the work is perhaps meant to offer only a template of magical study, empty chapters whose broadest contents are only generally defined, such that the individual and gifted magician might compose his very own personal Arbatel of Magic as his studies and skills progressed. A completed Arbatel, the mark of a true magician.
Was excellent, and you have some following notes on this, but you want to cite the main bibliographic reference would of course be the fourth book of Agrippa that Tyson edited, and that of course is available from the Welland Publications. And that's not to be confused with the big black book of occult philosophy. This is the second one, the fourth book of occult philosophy, and it has a kind of
oddly red.
Yeah, it's kind of a maroon cover, whereas the first book's black. Thank you so much, Frater SithMeth. That was a very, very beautiful presentation. And what I would like you to do is I would like you to put that up as a blog on our website, if you would, and please do. And then we can, some of the comments section on the blog, we can make some of the comments that we'll do as a follow up. So yeah, as I say, please definitely do that so the members can all read it. And now Tyson's as you said, Tyson's speculation about magicians who have done this. Immediately, I think about Barton and his second, Barton's second book, The Magical Evocation. I think he's very definitely influenced by the Arbatel, and he went and got all the spirits himself, and did the sigils in the back of the book. His sigils are all automatic writing, whereas the sigils that the author of the Arbatel has, the sample sigils, appear to be kind of like they're derived from Kameas of some sort. But and also, what do you think? I honestly feel like the Arbatel influenced D and Kelly with their Enochian workings. The governors and the terrestrial victory, the governors applied to the regions of the earth. There's so much influence, and the Arbatel, of course, was published at least about 60 years before D and Kelly actually came out with their work. What do you think about that?
Well, it's hard to say, simply because the author of the Arbatel is utterly unknown. The only thing known about it is that its first publication, of course, appeared in Switzerland in 1575. But it's certainly true that, the Book of Oberon appeared a couple of years later, and I think that work was published. I think it was published in England. I'm not sure about that, but it's quite possible there was a network of. There may have very well been a network of occultists. So John Dee was he was a socialite, and of course important to Queen Elizabeth I. It's very possible it was one of his students or perhaps one of his associates, and they may have shared the information. But really, that's only speculation. But it definitely has a feeling of the magic of the day of the 1500s. Which would, it could possibly be that one of the reasons why the author never published his 9 books is perhaps because the material was already out there. It may very well have been published by others, and perhaps he felt it may have been, redundant to publish his works, or maybe died. It is speculation.
Yeah, that's possible, and you know, the whole idea of the Olympic spirits. We know that during this period, the Italians especially, and this book apparently is originally Italian. The Italians were reviving classical paganism, and they were reviving it, and of course, and Dante almost gave it a kind of a Christian imprimatur, because he had the virtuous pagans down in his Tartarus, and so there's so much of this Italian Renaissance, and it's Florentine. I mean, I'm reading between the lines in the Arbatel. It's almost like you can see somebody in Florence writing this thing. It just seems like I would love to get I'd love to get Jocelyn Godwin's interpretations on this, because he would certainly be able to give us like the hip, and you can almost see the Arbatel and right alongside the Hypnerotomachia, if they sort of seem to go together, and the so I'm fascinated by it, but my main fascination is all of the various magicians, both then and later in England, and they were influenced by this tremendous influence. And
it is strange. It is strange that they were influenced so much by something which is essentially incomplete. Why that is, I don't know. It would be worth noting that the first publication of the Book of Occult Philosophy, the fourth book, so not just the Book of Occult Philosophy, but the fourth book of Occult Philosophy, which this has been included in, was actually published in 1559, which is about 17 years before the publication of the Arbatel of Magic separately. I don't actually know whether it was included in that first publication. That's something I should actually look into. I didn't think to check that, but clearly it was significant enough to include in future publications regardless. It's a mystery in that regard. It is fascinating that it entreats the magician. I could say that the most direct and practical section of the work entreats the magician to seek counsel with his holy guardian angel, and ostensibly, and it gives a prayer for that. So essentially, it gives the entire operation at the simplicity of the holy guardian angel operation, according to tradition.
You'll notice about that. And this is something that we should definitely point out, that it actually refers to in the Arbatel when they're talking about the guardian angel, the holy guardian angel. He cites Hermes talking about the angel of your birth and of the stars. In other words, that section in the Pomander, which Agrippa also replied to, and which is also in the Pauline Art of the Lemegeton, which cites that there are 3 guardian angels, which is what we do in Frater Apollo. When we do the Holy Guardian Angel Retreat, we do all 3 of them, and that's not Abramelin and the Mage. Abramelin and the Mage only does the greats, the Empyrean Holy Guardian Angel. He doesn't do the lower zodiacal and planetary one. But the publication of the Book of Abramelin happened in 1608. But that would indicate that whoever used the system of the Book of Abramelin was alive at the same time as the Arbatel, and quite possibly influenced it or used the Arbatel itself as a source for their magic. It seems to me that there's an indication in this that there was a greater occult community at large that was utilizing all of these systems and sharing knowledge, which would make sense in the sense that John Dee was also interested in magic. That, of course, the Enochian Aethers
to be placed across the planet such that it could be, such that planetary magic could be done. And this too suggests that, though it doesn't give any spirits. But at the same time, what's interesting is it says that the spirits don't have names beyond 40 years. And in that essence, the only immediately applicable section of the Arbatel that you could, without any other resource or grimoire, the section that you could use from the Arbatel is the first couple sections on basically priestly dedication to the work, on community love and contact with the Holy Guardian Angel after you've made contact, if God so ordains. The rest of the book could foreseeably be channeled. So in a sense, maybe it was never meant to be finished except by the individual practitioner, which is, I mean, it's my own suggestion, but it's a tantalizing one, especially considering that they say, you know, the sigils are just examples, the spirit names are just examples, even though they appear in future work. It may be that you're meant to make contact with the Holy Guardian Angel, and all of the magic from there is personal and personally generated, but the scaffold, the spirit names, the spirit wheel, which is given, and samples for the sigils is given. The number of their ruling days and spirits and powers of the planets are given, but the exact means for contacting them is not, which might indicate that you're meant to discover that from the Holy Guardian Angel. And that is in itself an interesting point, because in the aphorism 17 or 18, he suggests that you have to be born a magician. But at the same time, that kind of belies the idea that you make contact with your Holy Guardian Angel, unless he means specifically, he or she, who knows, means specifically that you have to be born a natural magician or scribe to make contact planetary spirits. But I think he means in general magic, which is odd when you think that, well, if he's getting magic and inspiration from the Holy Guardian Angel, which is something that all other magical texts suggest anyone can do, so long as they have the dedication to do it, then that would suggest, no, you're not born a magician. You gather this magic and this knowledge and these techniques from your Holy Guardian Angel. So it's a bit of a mystery, that one.
Yeah, that is kind of a, well, it sort of goes along with the biblical idea of the elite, you know, the 144,000 supposedly in the Bible that are supposed to be saved, and the rest are not. It's part of that chosen people kind of thing. I like to say there is no such thing as just chosen people. There are only people who choose to be chosen. But that's my own philosophy. Yeah, there are only those who choose to be chosen. But interestingly enough, also I might mention that Ophiel is the spirit of Mercury. Now, interestingly enough, one of the very, very few people back in the 1950s who was teaching magic and had a whole bunch of basic books on magic, which were being published by Weiser and Llewellyn, was a fellow by the name of Ed Peach. And Ed Peach called himself Ophiel and the spirit of Mercury, and obviously he got that idea from the Arbatel. And I still have and still recommend some of Ophiel's books. His little book on astral projection is still one of the best ones out there. And you know, yeah. In fact, remember when you suggested the Australian fellow who on astral projection,
Robert Bruce.
Yeah, right. And I remarked, and I got Robert Bruce's book, and I realized that so much of what Robert Bruce had in there was just basically what Ophiel was publishing on astral projection back in the 1950s, and since then, I think I gave you a copy of Ophiel's little astral projection book. I think the rats had chewed on it or something, and but it's still a very we have sentient rats in the temple. They ate the leather cover off my Bible. Yeah. Those rats are incredible. Yeah, but the most incredible. Oh yeah, they are. And that one time I got so mad at them, I started poisoning them, and they took all the poison out of the bait box and put it on my computer table. They're incredible. Yeah. Anyway, so now I kind of leave them alone. But anyway, though the influence that the Arbatel had on magicians. I believe Dean Kelly. I can see a lot of parallels in with the Arbatel in terrestrial victory, which was the original version of the Aether system. I can see a lot of parallels, and I know that Dee and Kelly were both steeped in Agrippa, and they certainly had access to that fourth book. And
yes.
So the Arbatel, I think, definitely influenced Dee and Kelly, and I know it influenced Barton. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about the fact that the Arbatel, and I agree with you that I think it also influenced that German version of Abramelin. I think it did.
Yeah.
Very definitely. And so this Arbatel is something that every serious student of magic, should certainly read it over and be aware of the influence that it has had. And I think that we, and it's like the connection between classical paganism, especially in Italy during the Renaissance, like I said, in Florence. I almost can say almost with a certainty that if the Arbatel wasn't written in Florence, it certainly, whoever wrote it was certainly had a strong affinity for Florence and for the whole Florentine system.
Well,
anyway,
Donald Tyson states very clearly in his critique of the work that John Dee, there's no record of John Dee having a copy of the Arbatel, but it certainly seems as though a great deal of John Dee's magic is analogous and very, very similar to the Arbatel itself. And to me, personally, I feel as though if the magic is similar in that way, it may be that rather than the Arbatel having influenced John Dee, it may have been the other way. Again, I think perhaps despite the fact that it was published in Switzerland, I mean, at this time, John Dee was serving as a court astrologer to Queen Elizabeth. But it's very, very possible, I think, again, speculation, but I think that it's quite possible that the Arbatel may have come from, directly or indirectly, from contact with John Dee in some way. It's more of an educated guess, I suppose.
I'm not sure the dating is going to back that up, though, because the publication of the Arbatel precedes Dee and Kelly. They were working around the turn of the century, and their work didn't get published and didn't really get in circulation until literally after 1600. So I think it probably is the other way around. The Arbatel, they would have had the Arbatel. Kelly. Well, and Kelly.
John Dee published his Magia Naturalis in 1558. Which was much long before the Arbatel. I mean, he was probably fairly young at this time. I mean, Edward Kelly was born in 1555. But regardless of that, he had published at least one work on natural magic at the time, about 15 years beforehand. It's quite possible that it was. I mean, it might have. I feel as though it's possible that if it was not from him directly, it was from one of his associates or someone sourcing perhaps his library or network. I'm not sure. Again, it is speculation.
Well, yeah, right. Well, no, we can split hairs on this probably quite a bit.
Yes,
but
indeed.
Anyway, regardless of whether it influenced Dee or Dee influenced it certainly was. The Arbatel certainly has been very, very influential, and also it inspired some magician, according to Tyson, some magician was inspired to study the Kabbalah. Now, that's kind of strange because all of the Hebrew and that has been applied to the Arbatel is a superficial application. The Arbatel
Yeah.
doesn't involve the Kabbalah at all. If anything,
No.
it would involve Greek. It would involve a Greek Kabbalah, which it doesn't.
Yeah.
But if it was going to have a Kabbalah, it would be a Greek Kabbalah. And however, those very strange sigils, you know, Ak and Fool and all of the rest of it, and all of those sigils, they have the look of Kameas. They look like they're Kamea. And in case anybody listening doesn't know what a Kamea is, it's basically a magic square. And you derive sigils from, you know, making geometric figures based on letters in a magic square. That's how you create a Kamea. But these sigils that the Arbatel author uses as examples, of course, as we've been saying, they're just examples. You're supposed to do it yourself. And you're supposed to come up with these things yourself, which, of course, Barden did do, and came up with his entire planetary grimoire in his second book. He did it himself, and his names are not taken from the Arbatel. He took the Arbatel at his word, and he did it himself. And that brings me to what we're going to do next week. Next week, I'm going to review Stephen Flower's latest book. Well, actually, it's the fourth edition of his book on the Fraternitatis Saturni, the German ceremonial magic order that was founded in 1926. And this book has just come out, Stephen Flower's History, Doctrine, and Rituals of the Magical Order of the Brotherhood of Saturn. And this is published by the Inner Traditions. And this is a remarkable book. In fact, it deals with Franz Barden and his mentor, Klensor. The two of them were apparently members of this Fraternitatis Saturni. And the similarities between what these people were doing back in the 1920s and 30s and what the OTA was doing in California in the 1970s are just incredible. I mean, it's hard for me to believe what I'm reading, but we'll get into this. We'll get into this next week, and hopefully, I'm gonna see if I can get Stephen Flowers to call in. Well, I'll hope. And if anybody listening knows Stephen Flowers, you might encourage him to call in on this one, because we're certainly going to give it a good review. And we gave his original Magic a very good review about 2 weeks ago. And so this is something to look forward to next week. And until then, I want to thank you, very honored Frater SithMeth. And please post this script that you did tonight. Post it as a blog on the website.
I will.
We'll do that one. Yeah, please. And we'll use the comments to make some of our observations in the comments section on the blog. So until next week, everybody out there, be sure and join us next week, and guarantee you we're gonna have a very interesting show on the Fraternitatis Saturni. And until then, good night and good magic.